speaking of conspiracy and something that we've been tracking here for a long time, I know some people are tired of hearing it, but I frankly cannot get over the total and complete transformation of Dr. Fauci into an outright political actor within the media. The transition, took like 6-7 months during actual COVID period of 2020, but is fully complete. And watching him in particular grapple with all of the questions around his own role in gain-of-function research, in the origin of COVID in the first place, all came to fore over the weekend. This was basically completely ignored by the media. And I guess I have to give CBS some credit because they pressed him on it a little bit. So let's put this up there on the screen. I actually tweeted it out over the weekend. But there's a section of this transcript which is very important. Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation asks Dr. Fauci, quote, Beijing acknowledges now they don't think that it originated in a market. She's referencing COVID. He says, quote, well, it may not have originated in the market, but it certainly could have. I mean, I don't think that they admitted it, that it didn't originate. I think they're saying they don't know how it originated. And so she continues to press him even more within the transcript, Krystal, and he continues to bring it back to the wet market theory 4 or 5 different times.
Yeah.
And this is remarkable to me because the amount of evidence currently on the wet market hypothesis is you would have to believe that a Laotian bat 1,000 miles away somehow was able to come to Wuhan, and then it was, like maybe eaten or bit a pangolin, and then that pangolin was eaten by a human. Or what's more likely? What did we just learn from documents released literally 2 weeks ago? Which is that specific Laotian bat, which had a virus, which was 98% genetically similar to the current COVID-19, was actually being specifically studied and used in experiments at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. You tell me which one is a little bit more likely. Once again, if the latter one, or about the Wuhan Institute, the lab leak, and all of that is true, then it directly implicates Dr. Fauci. But you and I were talking, I mean, you read this transcript, it's bonkers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like actually crazy.
It actually is. Because I was a little bit, I just read that one part and I was like, okay, but then you go on and you read the whole thing. The thing that stood out to me is she asks about, do we need to further regulate gain-of-function research?
Yes.
And he's like, no, we already did that. We're good to go. No problem there.
Which he reversed the regulation on.
Yeah. And then she asked him if we need to further regulate wet markets, and he's like, oh, 100%.
Right, so hold on a second. So the one with no evidence behind it, that needs to be regulated. The one with a ton of evidence behind it, and actually with a bunch of US government dollars that he contributes and controls, that stuff needs to be regulated.
Right. Well, and the other thing—
not regulated.
The other thing that it reminded me of, a point we have been making for a long time, is, the reason that you weren't allowed to talk about the lab leak hypothesis originally was because it was supposedly racist to talk about, right? That was the trump card, no pun intended, used to shut down any discussion in the press about the lab leak hypothesis. People are being censored on different social media platforms for even discussing it because it was quote unquote racist. But he goes on to talk about these wet markets. I mean, to me, it's a much more sort of caricaturish and potentially racist commentary that he's making there about all these weird animals
they won't
that they
stop
bring to
eating
these
bats in
markets.
China.
And I mean, that to me was a lot more problematic than the idea that, as is the case oftentimes, I mean, this would not be even close to the first time that something escaped out of a lab. How is that racist? That was just, so it reminded me of that as well. But he really does repeatedly throughout this interview go back to his conviction that it still may have come out of the wet market, and points to the fact that, and I think that this is true, that they made sure to clean out that, scrub the wet market, remove all the animals and everything early on. He insinuates that's, sort of part of a cover-up, but they also did weird things at the lab. They scrubbed the server there. And
in September 2019.
They changed the air conditioning unit and all that stuff. That part he doesn't seem to take as evidence of a cover-up, even though it potentially is.
It's truly nuts. And look, as I said over again, even the Chinese don't try and push the lab leak theory. Or, sorry, the wet market theory. They're like, their theory is basically like, oh, it was on some goods and, it like made its way here and that's kind of how it happened. And by the way, just stop asking a lot of questions. If you're in China, just zip it. And if you don't zip it, you're going to prison. That's what they've been doing over there. In May of 2020, as recently, they were not even standing by the wet market theory. So that just goes to show you there is not a single realistic iota of evidence behind the wet market specific theory. I'm not saying zoonotic origin, I'm saying the wet market specific theory. There's a ton more circumstantial on the lab leak. Guess which one Fauci is contributing to? And really, I found this next clip that we're about to show you, I really found it disgusting. Look, I don't like Ted Cruz, and I don't particularly love Rand Paul either, okay? They're both very partisan actors, etc. But they are elected United States senators. Dr. Fauci is a government official and specifically supposed to be nonpartisan and at the very least try to have some trust with the American people. Now, when Margaret Brennan presses him on what do you think about, the quote unquote attacks by Rand Paul, or Ted Cruz says you should be prosecuted, look at how much of like a Rachel Maddow viewer that this guy turns into. Just take a listen to this.
So anybody who spends lies and threatens and all that theater that goes on with some of the investigations and the congressional committees and the Rand Pauls and all that other nonsense, that's noise, Margaret. That's noise. I know what my job is.
Senator Cruz told the Attorney General you should be prosecuted.
Yeah. I have to laugh at that. I should be prosecuted. What happened on January 6th, Senator?
Do you think that this is about making you a scapegoat to deflect from President Trump?
Of course. You have to be asleep not to figure that one out.
Well, there are a lot of Republican senators taking aim at this. I mean,
that's okay. I'm just going to do my job. And I'm going to be saving lives, and they're going to be lying.
It seems another layer of danger to play politics around matters of life and death.
Right, exactly. And to me, that's unbelievably bad, because all I want to do is save people's lives. And I mean, anybody who's looking at this carefully realizes that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science. That's dangerous.
Oh, okay. You represent science. It's the ego of this man is unbelievable. And look, I know it sounds partisan, but anybody who is able to look at this, you don't even have to like Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, or whatever. You cannot declare yourself science. And what did we just point to preceding this? Is ignoring actual facts and evidence and pushing a hypothesis because you have a direct interest in making sure that one is true and one is not true. It's just completely crazy. And this is the man who runs a lot of our policy.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like, you have to, please, like, I'm begging the wine moms of America, like, wake up and see this for what it is. You cannot behave this way.
I don't really care that much about the Ted Cruz comment, to be honest with you. But the I am science thing is just so profoundly wrong and unhelpful. I mean, just as much as Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, or any sort of conspiracy theorist-minded person, let's put them aside, would want to turn him into science, because then you can if you can poke holes in a fallible human being, then, well, I mean, that is a really bad state of affairs for you to then lean into and say, yeah, you're right, I am science. And when you attack me, you're attacking science. When we know provably that he has been an incredibly fallible human being who was wrong about masks to start with, and, and wrong because he was just lying, not because he had bad information and came to America, oh, now we know more. No, because he wanted to make sure that frontline healthcare workers had the PPE they needed, which is a noble goal, but you don't have to lie to the American people about it. That was one. Of course, we know the changing narrative on herd immunity and how he changed his numbers on what percent of the population we need to have immunity before you could consider it having herd immunity. And he admitted that he did that based on what he thought the public could handle at that point. Of course, we know he's got a direct personal interest in pushing towards the zoonotic origin thesis, or apparently holding on, for dear life to the wet market thesis versus the lab leak hypothesis. So if you put yourself in that position, if you lean into that, saying, yeah, you're right, I am science, then he's correct that it makes it easy to sort of undermine scientific consensus writ large, because every human being is going to ultimately be fallible. So that's why this is so bad and damaging, and also just incredibly, incredibly egotistical. To be like, if you're attacking me, you are actually attacking science, when, there are a lot of bad faith attacks on Dr. Fauci. There's a lot of total conspiracy and insanity around Dr. Fauci, but there are also good faith critiques that are about him not adhering to the science, not following the data, and just being upfront with people and acting more like a spin doctor and a politician than a public health official.
Which is what he is doing, and is not what he was asked to do. It's a betrayal of the public trust, in my opinion. Actually, we're a lot worse off because of it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.